Hello, family. I'm Janaya Future Khan, and this is Dark Woke. Just before we begin, I want to say thank you so much to all the listeners out there, and a special shout out to all the supporters of the show. It really means the world to me. This is all possible because of you. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, our Patreon link will be on the right up below. Okay. Do you know I still am not used to that thing? I just keep pretending to be normal. In this episode, we are covering everything to do with the government shutdown. I am furious. I'm so angry that this is where we're at. At the same time, there's some silver linings here that I think are being missed. Okay, so I'm going to break down what's happening, why it's happening, who's responsible, what we should take away from all of this, and like at what point, right? Like, what do we think about the federal government? Why do we care about the federal government? Why is the right targeting the federal government, and how are leftists responding to it? Because yes, I will be challenging one of the leading leftist voices in the country, and it's honestly embarrassing to me that this is where we're at. But that's what happens when we don't have political education and everybody is still on the same side. It's about working together, but at the same time, there's some of us that maybe don't know that they're working against the causa, okay? So what is happening? Republicans and Democrats could not come together to pass a bill funding government services into October and beyond. Now, that's the simple way of saying it, right? So let me break it down a little bit more. The Republicans control both chambers of Congress, right? So Senate and the House, right? But in the Senate or its upper chamber, they're short of 60 votes. They need that to pass the spending bill, right? So in a shocking twist, Democrats actually have some leverage. Not Hakeem, though. He bothers me. So this has been a kind of bitter standoff, and it's over healthcare spending, right? The Democrats simply refuse to back a Republican bill. They say that it's going to make it harder for Americans to afford healthcare. I think we can agree with that objectively, okay? So what they want is an extension of tax credits. They're all set to expire. That will make health insurance cheaper for millions of Americans, and for a reversal of cuts to Medicaid that have been made by Donald Trump and his administration. The Democrats are also opposed to spending cuts to government health agencies. Okay, so that's kind of the backdrop, but you know how this goes. We break it down, I say why, and then we hit it hard with what's actually happening here. Just before I go on, though, yes, if you're watching, there's a little guy on my lap. His name is Purnell. I found him on the street, and then I, emotionally manipulated my friend to take him, which I do with all the dogs I find on the street. But that one wasn't hard because he's the best, except for Sula, okay? Just in case, because we're going to be vying for attention here, and he's definitely going to win. There's a couple of things I want to break down about this, and I'm going to try so hard not to yell, but we know that I'm going to end up yelling, okay? This is it. Why is a shutdown happening? Why do I have to get up every morning and look at these fugly skanks on every friggin' news channel? And it's always about some rickety ass bullshit fucking policy that's going to ruin our lives. And now we're facing a government shutdown. Is it good? Is it bad? It is important that the Democrats are leveraging what small things that they have, especially because this is a full sweep. It shows that the Trump administration, despite all of their illegal activity, all of their posturing, all of their bulldozing, there's still something, and some things they can't simply just make happen because they want to. That's the point of putting stress tests on the system, and that's exactly what this is, okay? So this government shutdown provides the perfect opportunity to see through Trump's agenda. And what is his agenda? What's the agenda of the Trump administration? It has to do with Project 2025, right? The goal is to completely populate the federal government with loyalists. It's to remove and dismantle as much of the federal government as possible. And that's why you're seeing, in addition to, we're going to shut the government down, but also we're going to lay off hundreds of thousands of people, okay? Federal workers. I don't want to bury the lead here. The entire point of this, of all of this, exactly what the Trump administration is doing, is to dismantle the federal government. That's it. Now you might say, why? Why the hell would they care about dismantling the federal government, right? Aren't the feds, the ops, right? My ops, I'm pretty sure some of them are listening to me right now. Why in the world should we care that the federal government is being dismantled? Well, for a couple of reasons. And do I love talking? No, of course I fucking don't. But here, we're going to go on this journey. We're going together. Okay? The federal government is the only institution, it's the only apparatus that we have that can hold these billionaires and these corporations accountable on any level. That's number one, which is why it's so important that they dismantle every aspect of it, right? The DOJ, who was about to get Trump's ass in prison? Oh, was it the DOJ? And now he's going after every single one of his political opponents as a result of that. But the other thing is, think about any public good that we've seen in terms of rights, right? The rights, remember those things? The things that we low-key sometimes take for granted, like the fact that I could vote. I mean, I can't. But, that's because I'm not like from here. Who is interested in marrying me? Let's give it another shot. Let's give it another go, right? Oh, there's a big sigh from this like very cute little dog. But listen. And then Sula felt upset about it, in case you heard that terrifying sound in the background. She just shook her head. I think it was like an absolutely not. Let me get locked in. All of our civil rights, all of our gender equality, anti-discrimination against women and the LGBT community, these happened at the federal level. Guess who doesn't like that? The right, the racists, the bigots. So if you dismantle the federal government, right, in every way imaginable, if you dismantle government, if you break it down and you smash it up and you make it so that nobody could ever put it back together again, well, then you've done your job. Do you remember when I said that we have two jobs on the left, which is to, one, build power, and two, stop the consolidation of power across the right? Well, they're actually doing both right now, right? They're consolidating their power, but they're making sure that we actually can't build power in the ways that we need to. Here's the thing. We can anyway, but not unless we get some dummies, right? Some of the dummies that we have yapping, our little talking heads, not until we get them all together, because the ways in which we take for granted the responsibility of being yappers when there's so few of us. Listen, I can't talk out of my neck, right? And that's not a Charlie Kirk joke, I swear. I can't talk out of my neck because I'm going to get 18 phone calls from people I haven't heard from in years who were part of the Black liberation movement, who are going to be like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? I would grift so fast. Can you imagine if I came out and started a YouTube channel like a couple years ago that was just like, as a former BLM, we were wrong about everything. I would have so much money. But instead I have integrity. And it's like, it doesn't even come with a sandwich, but it is essential because I am in a tradition. Do you remember when Ta-Nehesie Coates was talking about the tradition he was in that we covered in the last episode? That's why we're doing this special episode right now on this federal government shutdown, okay? So let me explain more thoroughly what it is that I mean, okay? We got a city. We got a couple cities that are hit hard by this because we're not even talking about the working class element of it as much as I'm not a fan of the feds, the ops, right? Hundreds of thousands of people have been let go. They've been fired. They've created these impossible conditions, the Trump administration, that any federal worker could live in. But I want to be clear, in 2018, 2019, right? That was during Trump's first reign of terror. We had about 2 million federal employees. When we think that, don't think the ops, right? Because that's where I go, my ops. I want you to think about the people who make sure Social Security goes through. I want you to think about the people who make sure that everybody can get their little SNAP benefits so that people can have food on the table for their children, right? I want you to think about rent. None of these federal workers are living large lives. Like the vast majority of them simply are not. They're also living paycheck to paycheck. But they're the ones that see through and execute on the wins that we make. And so if you remove those people and you fire them, and again, we've seen, I said a couple of years ago, A few years ago, we had what? 2 million people, okay? Hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off by Donald Trump already. They said they're going to promise hundreds of thousands more. We're not even a year into the first administration. I want you to really think about this, because a federal government isn't just, oh, the federal government doesn't just exist because it exists. It exists because there are people in it making it exist, making it make sense, making it function. If you remove those people, what do we have? Right? And again, the point is to damage and break it apart beyond repair. If we read and study Project 2025, which is some of what our yappers love to suggest that they do, we would know this, right? We would know this. Not only is it strategic from their vantage point, right, the bigots, to eliminate the services, but eliminate the people who execute those services. Do you get what I'm saying here? It's about erasing history. It's about ensuring that no Democrat, right, not even if we were lucky enough and worked hard enough to have an AOC, it's so that somebody like her couldn't achieve bringing it back together again in 4 fucking years. That's the point. And I was tested, niggas. I was tested. I was like, which cities were hit hardest? Because I like asking these kinds of questions. And I seen a little city, Ogden, Utah. And I was like, well, that sounds cute. Then I find out it's the largest employer of the city. And I was like, oh, I'm hooked. And then I found out that the institution, right, it's the government is the largest employer of the city. I found out it's the IRS. I was like, I don't care about these hoes. And I had to get my shit together and be like, okay, hold on. Because I don't like the IRS. You know, they take so much money from me. There's just so much money that they take from me. It is a function and a measure, right, of who is in charge. If we had somebody like AOC in charge, I promise you, them IRS hoes would be going after the rich, rich, rich. If we had a Zoran in charge, they'd be going after the rich, rich, rich. But they're coming after the average folks, and that means that we fucking can't stand them. But this is about looking at things from a wider aperture, which is a word that I looked up. And now I know, because I don't understand technology. So just to let you know, I had to get myself together too, okay? Now, I really don't like the IRS. So this is what I want us to understand about the federal government, okay? And I'm going to play the thing. Actually, you know what? Maybe I should just play the thing. I'm going to play the thing, okay? Because I got really mad. I got really annoyed by this. So I have been living, and we all have been living in the shadow of this stupid debate / actually, no, a debate has to be informed, right? It's a waxing poetic. It's a soapbox mantra that so-called lefties love to yap about, right? The Democrats and the Republicans are the same, right? You heard me say, I agree with Michelle Wolf to a point where they're all buddies, or at least they were. That's nasty. That's nasty work. I don't want to see that. But that doesn't mean that they're the same. This is about understanding what opponents we fight and what conditions we fight over. The establishment Dems are a rot on the system. They are a corporatocracy. We don't have caps on government spending, on political spending, etc. These are problems that we have, right? These are major problems that we have, but I just want to hone in on this thing, right? Because in this moment where I am suggesting that we care about what the federal government is capable of, what it does, I'm going to explain that by couching it in an argument, which is my favorite thing to do. And I'm going to do that, okay, by playing a clip from one of the most prominent leftists that we have, Hassan Piker. And look, I got nothing against Hassan. I think it's great that we have some giant Turkish man that is a lefty yapper, but he's not bound by any tradition, right? And it's like, I need to know everything and about everyone, what they're saying, what they're doing. But so of course he watched this, Ezra Ta-Nehesie Coates interview, and this is one of his reactions to it. Mine was so much better. I just want to point that out. And that's not because he's dumb or wrong about a lot of things. It's because he's D-League and I'm NBA. That's what happens when you're in a tradition, but he didn't even recognize the word that Ta-Nehesie Coates was saying. And it's because of that, because he is not in a tradition, right? That what I'm about to play Makes sense. Like basically his lack of tradition is precisely why he says shit like this. And it is actually something that is a major disservice to the left in our ability to build power. Now, if you're pissed off because you think I'm about to, cap for the, or cape for the fucking Democratic Party or Biden, I got news for you. But why don't I just shut up for a second and play this? So he's responding something that Ezra Klein is saying here, but I want you to really pay attention to what he says about the Biden administration and what it did. And you'll see there's a conflation between the Biden administration and the Trump one. But you know what? Let me just play this.
Your opponent, in the aftermath of that recognition, will just turn around and say, see, these pro-trans losers even recognize I'm right. Vote for me. I will deal with the trans people with the integrity necessary. Okay? So not only do you look hypocritical, but you end up losing for that reason. Because you can never defeat the Republicans on hate mongering. You just can't. Okay? The second part of the story that is also objectionable.
This is the part I really want you to lock in. And the reason why I played that additional couple of seconds is because I want to make sure that we know that this was absolutely 100% within the context that he was speaking of. This is not taking it out of turn. He's making the claim, right? And we're responding to it, but let him cook, right?
The second part of the story that is also objectionable, which I have not even waited for his statement, by the way, and I'm already arguing against what I know he's going to say with my heart of hearts because I've heard it so many goddamn times from other liberals.
He's referring to Ezra Klein here, but this is the meat and bones. So he's referring to Ezra Klein when he made that mention of, Ta-Nehesie Code says trans people and the way that they think and the way that they feel, and we have to care about that. And Ezra is about to hit him back with the, yeah, but if we had these things, right, wouldn't that be better? Okay. If we had policies in place, right? If we build power, wouldn't that benefit trans people?
The second part of the story that is also objectionable, which I have not even waited for his statement, by the way, and I'm already arguing against what I know he's going to say with my heart of hearts because I've heard it so many goddamn times from other liberals, is that Joe Biden was president when Republicans were aggressively hitting the anti-trans narratives and also successfully implementing anti-trans legislation at the state legislature level already, building the framework for what came next. And in the absence of fighting back against that, the administration also allowed this to happen in some very meaningful ways.
This is fucking stupid. I don't know how else to say that. It's just simply not true. And I am shockingly, right, a huge proponent of accuracy. Because I am black, I don't get to talk out of turn. When I say that something is going on, it's going on. And because I care about debate, right, I have to refute what I say with actual facts. If you were to just simply type into fucking Google the ways in which Biden fought against anti-Trump legislation, it would really tell you. Did you know that? Did you know that you could look something up and then the answer would actually present itself? And if it's not the answer, it's the breadcrumbs that will lead you to what you know or what you need to know. Well, here's the thing, okay? And again, I'm not going to cop for no fucking toothy bitch, right? Like his skin was parchment. He was so old. It's stressful to me, but I want to be clear about something, okay? Biden, on his first day in office in 2021, issued an executive order establishing a policy to prevent and combat discrimination against LGBTQ peoples, right? In 2022, there was another one. There was another executive order they put into action that directed federal agencies to increase access to gender-affirming care, right? Part of that action was to minimize statewide efforts to limit access to care for transgender youth, right? While he was in office, he expanded federal protections, right? You go back to the Supreme Court 2020 Bostock versus Clayton County ruling, okay? The administration, that's the Biden administration, directed federal agencies to interpret existing civil rights laws as protecting against discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, right? So we know it was discrimination when it came to things like HRT, because as I have broken down in previous episodes, cis kids, right, we'll call them that, already access gender affirming care. If they go through puberty too quickly, they go on hormone blockers. If they experience puberty too late, they go on hormone therapy. It's already accessible. How can we talk about it being, whether it's safe for children or not, when the vast majority of kids who have access to it are actually not trans identified? It was discrimination because it was only not accessible to trans youth, right? So what was the result of that? Agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services, right? The Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Education, right? They all issued guidance to expand non-discrimination protections, okay? I don't care about the trans military stuff, but he did some of that. We could just skip that. I don't give a shit. Sorry. Thank you for your service, I guess. But there is the part, though, that matters to me, that challenged me on my own relationship to the military-industrial complex, where I realized that there was a class analysis that I was missing when it came to who goes to the military, because it's different here than it is in Canada, for example, right? In terms of just how much infrastructure and supports they provide, but that's another episode for another time, right? So I just named some of the protections that went in. Now, this doesn't mean, oh, I'm going somewhere with this, but let me cook, because I'm going somewhere with this. Let me cook. Okay. Those are some of the protections, right? And the ways that the same government agencies that the Trump administration is seeking to eradicate, those observances, those guidelines that help protect transgender youth and trans people, including the entire LGBTQ population. Oh yeah, that's the thing that he's trying to eliminate. But let me go on, right? They also made several legal challenges against states that refused to do so. The Department of Justice, under the Biden administration, sued several states over anti-transgender laws, arguing that they were unconstitutional. Interesting, right? So there were challenges to the healthcare bans. The DOJ filed lawsuits challenging state laws that ban medically necessary gender-affirming care for trans adolescents. That's a very, very, very intense time for young people generally. Now imagine if something is wrong, right, between the person that you look like and the person you know yourself to be. Now add that to it, right? But don't let me just why don't I give you an example? Like in 2023, right, when the administration sued Tennessee over its ban on care for trans youth. Or how about in 2024, right, when the Supreme Court was asked to review lower court decisions upholding similar bans in Tennessee and Kentucky. Now look, look, that doesn't mean that this was all enough. Oh, I'm about to cook. I'm going somewhere with this. There were interventions in civil rights cases as well, right? The DOJ filed statements of interest in lawsuits challenging state laws, arguing that measures restricting care or barring trans students from sports was discriminatory and violated federal law. So it's funny to me that one of the leading yappers on the left says that they didn't do anything, right? It was so ineffective, so and yet somehow the Trump administration and Project 2025 and all the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone into dismantling the DOJ, into buying the election, right? They see it as a problem. They definitely see it as a problem. They see it as something that they never want to happen again. It's why they're dismantling the DOJ in the first place, right? But, oh, I'm not done. Let me cook. There are also regulatory efforts and legal challenges, right? But I don't want to belabor how wrong, maybe actually a little bit more. So we got Health and Human Services. I mentioned that, the HHS. Their rule on healthcare discrimination in 2024, they issued a final rule affirming that Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act sex discrimination prohibition included protections for gender identity, right? Of course, federal judges temporarily blocked that enforcement in several states after Republican-led lawsuits, but that's the name of the game. I don't even need to go in because there were things on Title, what was it? Was it 9? What's the number? What's I and X? What's that one again, Corey? Isn't it Title IX? Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. 2024, the Department of Education finalized rules for Title IX that prohibited discrimination based on gender identity in schools, including harassment and access to facilities. But of course, and then as early as 2025, federal courts had enjoined the rules enforcement in 26 states because it's a back and forth. But am I saying, okay, am I saying that means the Biden administration cared about trans people or they did a good job? No. This is why it bothers me that Hassan Piker is just like, they didn't do anything. They're the same. What the fuck are you talking about? This is not a measure. It's when government does something, and especially when the fucking establishment Democrats do something, it's not because they care about trans people or because they're good at what they do. It's a measure of our strength and our power. The fact that we made enough of a fucking stink. And by the way, I don't think we were fighting in our best way or in our best power, but they don't do the right thing. Federal government and government doesn't do the quote right thing because they want to. It's a measure of our power and efficacy, right? Establishment Dems are in the fucking corporate gutter. It's the fact that they did anything at all that tells us the measure of our work. Ordinary people made it possible that anything was done at all. Ordinary people made such a fucking stink about it that the Biden administration was forced to address it on some level. Parents and children and teenagers and teachers and advocates and activists made it so that the Biden administration was forced to do something. And the reason, right? The reason that the federal government is being dismantled by Donald Trump and his ilk is because they know, A, that it is the only apparatus that can be used to hold them accountable. And it's really the only place where any wins that we've had have been protected and enforced. That doesn't mean that the federal government is inherent good. No, it means that when we play to win, when we build fucking power and have enough influence and enough political might, when we're not just out on the streets yipping and yapping about how much we care about things, even though really when you protest, you're ultimately petitioning the government to do what the fuck you want it to do. Somehow we don't know this. And this is what I mean when I say D-League and NBA. Because I don't get this, because ultimately, right, the conclusion that's drawn is that that Kamala and Trump are the same. And you know what? I get it. You have been saying that for years. A lot of so-called leftists have been saying that they're the same. They're the same. They're the same. They're the same. I don't know what to do with that level of inaccuracy. I don't fuck with the system at all. Oh my gosh. Right? But I have a responsibility to ensure that we build our power up and that we use that power to see through the vision of future and life and society that we want, the level of hubris and ego that it takes to suggest that, knowing what we know right now, under the auspicious, right, sunrise of fucking fascism, that we're still talking this way. I'm going to break this down. I'm going to really break this down. Okay. This is what broke Black Lives Matter up. And I'm not talking about that whatever cute thing that happened in 2020, right? That was great. The rest of the world caught up. It was nice. You know, I'm never going to squander and take for granted people's time and energy and attention. It's just that the movement itself was not in 2020. Some really major policy initiatives and everything else were passed and seen through, and that was the work of incredible people, okay? I don't want to minimize that. But when I say BLM, I think of a different time. I think of the time between 2013 and 2017 when I was part of one of the best movements I've ever seen in my entire life. In fact, the most effective So much so that every single movement since has tried to follow in its wake. And you want to know how I know it was effective? Because every fucking body hated us, okay? Everybody hated us. But what broke us up? 2016, we couldn't get our shit together, right? We couldn't. You had people who were more experienced, who were more educated. And I don't mean educated like formally, I mean better read, who had studied history, who had studied activism, who had studied protests, who were in relationship with Angela Davis and Kimberly Crenshaw, right? Just people who had made this work possible at the level that they have, right? None of these folks are perfect. It's about understanding tradition, which just flew over. It's just wild to me. I'm like, do you have Black friends? Have you ever talked to a Black person meaningfully? I don't know. Because that means that you're precisely what we were talking about in the last episode. You don't talk about race. That's telling. You don't understand it. That's telling. And I'm not talking about this is racist, this is fucked up, this is whatever. I mean meaningfully, right? Something that is consistently brought up as it relates to Black Americans. In a tradition. Let me break it down even further, okay? So here we go. 2016 happens, and you have the more informed, more experienced organizers who also happen to be a little bit older. And I say that because that is a part that I think is a tension that we have to address at some point, right? So here they are, and they're saying, okay, we got to keep doing the work that we've been doing, but we also need to add an electoral justice strategy to it because we have to stop the consolidation of power across the right? That is my summation of it, because that is the only thing that could be concluded from our strategy, right? We have to build power. There was a subset of folks who were less experienced, less read, and very entitled and annoying. But though the entitled and annoying is like, that just comes with ignorance, right? It comes with not being part of a tradition. But they were right, ultimately, when they said, this system fucking sucks and we want to see change. They were absolutely right about that. But their response wasn't, okay, I don't want to buy into this part. I don't want to do this part of the work. I'm going to focus on organizing here. No, their entire energy and effort went into constantly attacking their comrades, constantly finding ways to undercut their comrades, getting online, right? And trying to do the same, trying to engender and garner support. Referred to comrades as neoliberals. And this is the only thing that matters, okay? Because they said it. Trump and Clinton were the same. That was their thing. Trump and Hillary Clinton are exactly the same. They're the same kind of threat. They're the exact same kind of threat. And I do think that they're both a threat. But if you don't fully understand the opponent that you're fighting, then you will never win to begin with. Okay, when I get into the boxing ring with somebody who's, with one person versus the next, it's not the same strategy. That's stupid. That is so dumb. So here's my question, right? Of those folks, because it's true, the attacks got so much, they became so intense. It destroyed morale. And it just did not make sense to continue. And movements aren't supposed to last forever, so that's okay. That's okay. Here's my question. What work was accomplished after that, right? Like from these folks who were like, this is not the way, you're fucked up, this is not how you do it. What work? I looked those people up. They haven't done shit. They're not organizers offline. They're not organizers online, really. They've done nothing. They've accomplished nothing, right? They haven't built power anywhere. Because there's something about those two things. Because if you are busy doing the work you're supposed to be doing, you don't have time to attack your comrades. You go do that work. No one stopped. If you believe in grassroots initiatives, then do that. Fucking do that. And in fact, use the folks who are doing the electoral justice strategy, which by the way was part of a multi-fold strategy, but they don't do anything. They don't accomplish anything. I've looked. I agree the system is rotten to the core. Surely. But I don't get to fucking kick back because I have a responsibility to the people in this country and in the world. I am a service worker. That is what a lefty is. I am a service worker. And my job, if every nation state is inherently disgusting, whatever, my job is to protect as many people and save as many people as I can while I can. It's very simple. What did they accomplish? Okay, so what did we get done, right? I went into Color of Change, right? One of the leading racial justice organizations in the country. You want to know how Glenn Beck got off the air on Fox? It was them. They did. They are the ones who made real an advertising and advertiser strategy. That's why you all do it. That's why we all do it now, right? That's where I went. I learned about the shadow entities that run the corporatocracy. And I learned how to organize at an even higher level. Okay, cool. Alicia Garza goes on to the Black Futures Lab. Adrian Marie Brown puts out a bunch of books. Maurice Mitchell goes on and becomes the national director of the Working Families Party. I could go on, right? I could tell you about the books that people wrote. Charlene Carruthers wrote a book. Barbara Ransby wrote. Well, she had multiple books that came out. There's so much literature, so much power that was built. You want to know? That's how you got Cori Bush, right? Because of folks like Kayla Reed and J. Marie Brown that organized tirelessly in St. Louis and all around. And these are just the people I could name off the top of my head. That's what happens when you're bound by a tradition. That's what happens when you care about building power. It is actually so irresponsible to still be yapping this nonsense at this time. It fuels nihilism. And again, it erases the work that people did that forced the Biden administration to even take action in the first place. And it undermines how essential it is that this administration currently, the Trump administration, needs to destroy the federal government. Let me say it differently, okay? Hassan Piker saying that the Biden administration did nothing to protect trans rights, even though a simple Google search would actually demonstrate otherwise, is so stupid and ignorant and irresponsible. Not because this is about caping for the Biden administration. Oh no, they signed in executive orders as soon as they got in, but because it erases the power that ordinary people, teachers, parents, children, teenagers, advocates, activists, that they took to force the Biden administration to take action in the first place. That's number one. Number two, it's irresponsible because it builds and fuels more disgust and ire against the federal government, which is not because the federal government is inherently good, but because it is the only metric that holds this administration, the Trump administration, accountable. And it's the only place where the rights and freedoms that we have fought for and hard-earned protections, like the Civil Rights Act, it is the only place where that shit was codified and enforced. That's why the Trump administration is destroying it. And all comments like that do. Trump and Kamala are the same. It just shows ego. And guess what, yo? Feeding your ego does not feed your people. Like, can we please grow the fuck up? It's, even if you believe every single thing, and for the record, I don't contest it. I think this shit's rotten, right? But let me explain why the Trump administration is so terrified of the federal government and why they want to destroy it beyond recognition, right? The Civil Rights Act of the Reconstruction era was passed after the Civil War, right? Yeah. That's the legislative landmark on the legislative branch, right? Part of the Civil Rights Act. Civil Rights Act of 1957, right? This was the first major civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. You're going to start to notice something. These are all black wins. That's what you're going to start to notice. Funny how it's so easy to erase those, despite the fact that we are all living better lives as a result of them, right? How about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? That comprehensive law is the cornerstone of the modern civil rights movement. That's the one that most people think about. It outlawed what? Discrimination in employment and public accommodations based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Do you think that the states just adopted that shit? No, it was enforced. And do you think that the federal government just gave it to us? No, it was fucking won. That's why they want the federal government dismantled, right? How about the Fair Housing Act of 1968? Okay, yeah. Also known as the Civil Rights Act of 1968, banned discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing. Why? Why don't you look up redlining? You might know why. But it protected everyone. Why we even have Section 504 in the first place was because Black people and disabled people work together because a Black disabled person existed. Oh my God. A great documentary that shows some of how that happened is Crip Camp. But I've talked about this before. It was organizers in the Black Panther Party and disability rights organizers that worked together tirelessly to occupy a building in San Francisco and did it so well, right? The Black Panther Party used their media attention and also their ability, their physical ability to run around, move around, do this, do that, to bring in food and water and media and to make sure that the room stayed cool enough because there was no goddamn AC in that building. Guess what's being attacked right now? Section 504. Okay, right? How about Brown v. Board of Education? Okay. What about Loving versus Virginia? And you know what? A lot of biracials in the country annoy the shit out of me. But I'm not against people going to do what they got to do. I just want the biracials to be less annoying. That's all I'm saying. I could go on and on and on and on. I don't need to. This is why they want it dismantled. And when you build out, need a little bit of water. And when we are continuously getting it shoved down our throat, that these entities are the same. Because we've overcommitted to that framework, because we don't know how to pivot and because we don't know how to build power, because we're not responsible or accountable to anyone. You know, this is the thing that stresses me out with streamers who can always run back and say, well, I'm just a streamer, but also just talking heads in general. You're accountable to your bottom dollar and your bottom line. You're not accountable to a tradition. I am. And that is what Ta-Nehesie Coates was referencing when he was talking to Ezra Klein. And that is what Hassan Piker missed. And what he will continue to miss unless he can let go of some of the ego that plagues the left, that plagues so many so-called leftists that are not bound by tradition, that are not well-read. And you will never in your life hear me say, this means we all got to start doing electoral justice. No, the fuck it doesn't. But it means to continuously undermine the essential elements that we need to keep people safe, to consistently suggest that this is irredeemable or whatever, to fuel nihilism. It ultimately, it's ahistorical in nature. It's not strategic, and it is antithetical to building power. So ask me then, is that a leftist? Is that what a leftist does? I don't think so. Not anyone that I respect. You know, and again, it's not personal. I like the guy somewhat, and I'm glad that he's yapping out there. But this is something that is such a danger. It is a cancer that has plagued the left for about as long as I've been a part of it. And I haven't just been a part of it here. I'm glad that he did the work that he did around Palestine. I think it was essential. I'm trying to balance this out so we all know that I actually am not being just a fucking asshole. I mean, I am an asshole. Maybe a hater is the better word, because I do think when it comes to building awareness of things, that literally is the greatest injustice of our lifetime. That's essential. My job is to look at what more could have been done if there was a strategy behind it that wasn't just what's going to get me the clicks and views I need. Right? And I believe that there was a moral and ethical element to it too, but I want, again, to remind you that there is a reason why we call it a tradition. It's who you're accountable to. It's who you're accountable to. And as much as I could be like, oh, I'm accountable to the audience and I'm accountable to fans, not in the same way that I'm accountable to my peers. And I have peers because I've done the work. And when you have peers, you are much more precise and intentional about what the fuck you say and what you don't. So It's a little special. I was going to talk about the fact that Tucker Carlson thinks that Pete Buttigieg being gay is fake. And that feels like a great way for me to log off on this because I thought that shit was hilarious. Just say you like him. Just say he's good at what he does. I love that it's easier for Tucker Carlson to be like, he's fake gay than it is to be like, I like this man. Like, I'm just trying to understand the logic or illogic it would take to be like, no, this guy definitely is doing butt sex as a psyop. Like, he's got butt in his name. And a double T at that. And I've seen Chasten. Listen. Buttigieg is a phenomenal fucking orator. He really is. I think he's one of the Democrats' best. But he's just not even close to being someone who is reflective of leftist politics. But you know what that's a measure of? Us. How hard we push, how hard we fight, what things we're willing to risk, what things we're willing to destroy. And it's not because I think it's just all going to happen. It's because it's worth the fight. It's because I will not take for granted the sacrifices that were made before me. And I will not take for granted the lived experiences of those who are here now and to come. I want to be really fucking clear that the erasure that just happened, he didn't do anything, right? There were kids. There were young people whose lives were dramatically transformed because of access to that care. And in the absence of it, there are kids whose lives are dramatically altered and some even destroyed for lack of access to it. But by all means, go off. Simple bitch. Couldn't even grieve Jane Goodall. I fucking did a casual research on her. I thought she was just a nice chimpanzee-loving old white lady. Nope. She was fucking weird about race too. Can anyone be normal for 5 minutes? All to say, this shutdown is exactly what the Trump administration is going to use to see through their agenda. It is essential that the Democrats do what small things that they're doing, but I don't care about them, to be honest with you. I really don't. I care about us and what we're going to do about it. Oh my God, the power structure doesn't inherently work in our favor? What a fucking shock. What? Nancy Pelosi and fucking Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, shut up, Hakeem, aren't in the interest of leftist socialist beliefs? No, they're not. And I'm sorry, we're better fighters than them. If we put our shit together, we would win in the ways that we can. And again, great nations, and I'm not saying great as in amazing, great nations move in the way that they move. I can't say for a fact whether or not what we do dramatically alters it in our lifetime. But isn't it worth the attempt? Isn't that a life worth living to try anyway, to do it fucking anyway? Isn't it worth that to go out with our fucking boots on? Don't you want to look back and feel the impact? I don't give a fuck about your beliefs. And I think that's what these streamers and these fucking pundits love to yap about, their fucking beliefs. What are the results of your beliefs? And I'm talking about, have people's actual lived experience who don't know you, who are not a fan of you, have they been altered by any of the work that you've done in any meaningful way? And that's not specific to Hassan. I too am under that. I have to look at that. I lost so much in that work, so many fucking relationships, so much safety. Fuck. I don't regret a second of it, right? Of the work. I want to do it better. I want us to approach it better. I want to be smarter. I want to be more strategic, but it was fucking worth it. Did these major transformations change? Did they happen with police funding? No. But it forced a fucking conversation. The bills and the policies didn't pass, but it's because we didn't have the political power to see that. I'm going to end with this and this only. Part of the reason why I take this so seriously is because I felt the same way. I know it. I know. That also means I know what level it's on. I used to feel the same way. I remember reading everything I needed to read on the Panthers. Let me take a little bit more water. Okay. Kwame Ture. I mean, he was part of SNCC, but just indulge me. Okay. Mumia, Sada, Angela, Huey, Elaine, Bobby, right? Sandra, I read all their work. Angela, who was not actually a former member of the Black Panther Party, but was actually part of the Socialist Party, but was associated with the Black Panthers, and she doesn't have a problem with that. But it just wasn't official, right? I read their work, and when I found out that some of them ran for office afterwards, after everything that the COINTELPRO and the CIA and the FBI and the government, I mean, we had our first fucking SWAT teams meant to target black radicals. I thought, how the fuck could they ever do that? I was disgusted. I was confused. I felt betrayed. I was like, never me. I understand that. I lived in that. It's only after all the years that I've put into actual organizing, not sitting and talking. Worker strike in Buenaventura, I'm out there. Standing Rock, I'm out there. Palestine, Israel, I'm out there. Right? I've traveled the world doing this work. Frontline. Where sometimes I'm put up in a decent hotel. I'm doing a stop on a college tour. And otherwise I'm sleeping on somebody's pissy fucking sofa in their, in their garage. Right? Or I'm getting fucking eaten alive by bedbugs in Bogota on my way to the worker strike in Buenaventura. Why? So I could learn, so that I could aid and assist. That's really what my job was. Do you want to know what I understand now? It does something to you when you realize that you can't protect anyone. That's why they started to run for office. That's why they started to think about what electoral justice could look like. We couldn't protect anyone. That for all the sacrifices, for all the death, we still have Black Panthers that are rotting as political prisoners in complete isolation. The very idea of us building power is enough to put us in jail for the rest of our lives. That's what is dangerous to this country. And somehow the Trump administration understands that, but not so-called leftists. I don't have that arrogance anymore. I want to save as many people as I can while I can, and protect as many people as I can while I can. And I want to build power in every way that we can, because guess what? Let me ask you this. Has it been fucking working that we're not? Has it worked? Right? Let me ask you about how we don't talk about race in America. Is it working to our advantage? Maybe it's time we try something new, right? And it's not that it wasn't attempted before. It's that it wasn't attempted in a large enough way. And maybe now, knowing what we know, with things as naked as they are, maybe now we do things differently. And you know what? Some people are coming and some aren't. But what makes me happy and what helps me sleep at night is that the benefits that come from doing good work will reach everybody just the same. So, and that's all it comes down to for me in the end. That's what it looks like when ego isn't the thing driving your practice and what you say. And I'm light skinned. I can be fucking egotistical when the time's right. But not about this. Not about this. Not when people's lives are on the line. Not when people's experience of life is on the line. So, Jane Goodall was a bit of a cunt. She also liked monkeys. That's the life. Something profound. Insert. Do you know what? In the comments, okay? Insert something profound. Help me, because this dog is making me so hot. Look how red my nose is. Look how red my nose is. This is what happens when we're saying clown shit online. So sorry, okay? Again, I am such a proponent of all of us talking, but I just need us to be bound by a tradition, because otherwise, are we helping? Are we building power? Right? Are we affirming some of our worst instincts and making it so that other people feel like it's okay that they do the same? Right? Yapper to yapper. Okay. With that, I want to say thank you so much for listening. We'll be following this shutdown and all of its implications. But this felt so important to get out there. I want to say thank you to Corey, who's a lead producer. Thanks to Wit, who's like cutting the things them up. And last but not least, thank you to each and every one of you that make this show possible. Give us a year. Okay, give us a fucking year. Let's go, babies. Let's go. With that, that's been episode 5 of Dark World. Love y'all.